women founders face a lot of biases. 330 billion of VC funds was distributed last year. Only 2% of that funding went to women founders. The Impact Accelerator for Women's program is in-person and virtual. Startups that get into the program receive $100,000 in AWS credits and $125,000 in a cash grant. They also are paired with a business mentor and a technical mentor that works with them on a weekly basis.
We're not just building our companies, we're changing the world at the same time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ask Me Anything webinar for the AWS Impact Accelerator for the Women's Founders applications. We're so glad you're here and continuing. People are kind of continuing to come in, so welcome. Before we get started, I wanted to cover a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event, and we hope you are very participatory and really active. This is about you getting the information you want and you need. So you should see in your control panel on the upper right-hand corner of your screen that you selected either to join by a phone call or through your computer audio. So if any reason you need to change your selection throughout today's call, you can do so by accessing your audio pane in your control panel, and all attendees will be muted and you will not be able to unmute yourself. So you will have an opportunity to submit your questions at any time through text. So you can ask me and my colleague Denise any questions by typing those questions into the questions pane of the control panel. So send those questions in anytime. We'll be collecting them throughout the event today, and we will address them all during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. We also have a couple members of our program team who are standing by and can answer some of your questions privately in real time. Today, we'll also be referencing two handouts, including the deck that we're going to walk through today and an example of the application. So both of those handouts are available in the handout pane of your control panel, and you can download those at any time. So feel free to take a minute now and just download those two assets so that you have them. Now I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Megan Casey. I'm a Senior Venture Capital Business Development Manager at AWS. And I'd like to also introduce my co-presenter, Denise Quashie, who is AWS's Head of Global Startup Marketing and Programs and the creator of the AWS Impact Accelerator, or as she was known to our first cohort, as Queen Denise.
My title's getting longer every day.
Aptly named. I call her that myself. So before I hand it over to Denise, who's going to kick this off and tell you more about our program, we have a quick poll for you. We want to get to know who's in the audience and get to know you a little bit better. So we'd like to know how many of you have applied or participated in an accelerator, and how many are brand new to the space. So please select your response and hit submit. So if you're just joining, we're starting off with a quick poll to get to know who's in the audience today. So I think we are ready to close the poll, and let's share the results with everyone. Okay, so we're almost kind of split 50-50 with those that are completely brand new, and this could be their first accelerator program ever, and those that have already participated in one or more accelerator programs. And hopefully for those that applied, maybe some of you have already applied to our accelerator. So thank you for answering that. Over to Denise so that she can share some more about the accelerator.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. Excuse me. Hope everyone's having a great day. So this is our agenda for the day. So we're going to quickly talk about the Impact Accelerator, what it is, how it got started, talk a little bit about why you should apply for the program, the criteria that we're looking for in the applications, and then we'll spend a lot of time focusing more around how to make your application stand out. And then we'll quickly go over timelines and expectations, and then we'll answer your questions. But as Megan mentioned, please feel free to start typing in your questions in the chat. And should we get time throughout, we'll answer those live. But we do have a team that is supporting the chat as well, and they may be able to answer your questions directly too. So let's get started. Okay, so this is a really big number. $333 billion in VC funds were distributed last year, 2021. Even during COVID, that's such a high number. And it's even more than what was distributed in 2020 and in 2019. But the surprising thing about this is only 2% of that funding actually went to women founders. So I'm just going to let that kind of sink in for just a second. So $330 billion in VC funding, and just 2% of that went to women founders. What we don't cover on this slide is where the rest of that money went to. So you may be surprised to learn that out of that 330 billion, 2% went to women founders, but only 0.5% of that went to LGBTQIA founders, and 1% of that went to Black founders, and just about 1.2% of that went to Latino founders. So as you can see, the majority of that went to straight white men. And so this is the reason why we created this program. So Keely, if you want to move forward. So we created a fund called the AWS Impact Accelerator. It's a $30 million fund for underrepresented founders. And how we're defining that today, which it changes all the time, but how we're defining that is for Black, Latino, LGBTQIA+, along with women founders. We're starting off our cohorts with this year with Black founders. We just wrapped up that program, and now we're squarely focusing on helping women founders succeed and raise funds as well too. So our 30 million fund for underrepresented founders is really inclusive of helping and supporting those founders that have been overlooked and often counted out. Kaylee, if you want to move forward. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits from day one. So $225,000 for every qualifying startup in the program. So how we break that down is $100,000 in AWS service credits through our program called AWS Activate. So that gives you a ton of runway with AWS to start building technically with your business. It also gives you a ton of credits if you're super early, which looking at the poll, Megan, it seems like there's quite a few early startups on this call, which is great. That the 100,000 really gives you a big security blanket to kind of test things out technically with AWS or just even in the cloud, and really kind of focus on your product and infrastructure and not have to worry about how do you actually scale your business technically. So 100,000 in AWS credits, which gives you a very, very long runway. In addition to that, this was one of those hills I was prepared to die on, Megan, with this program, is that I wanted to make sure that there was a cash component to it as well. So every startup in the program receives $125,000 in a cash grant. So this is non-equity. We take zero equity. There's no cost for this program. So 100,000 in credits and $125,000 in cash that you can use for keeping the lights on, hiring people, working on your brand and messaging, and really focusing on the product. So our thought here is that this cash and credits gives you an opportunity to really focus on what's important and not have to try to figure out how you're actually going to pay your contractors. Technology turbocharged. So what that means is that you get access to our entire suite of technical services and products that we have for AWS. You also get paired with one of our startup solution architects. So think of him or her as a technical advisor. You can leverage them for hiring more technical people. You can leverage them for migration. You can leverage them for almost anything technically that you can think of, and they become a little bit of an extension of your CTO or your technical lead. So you get that full tech stack of AWS and get to use services and programs that some of the top startups that run on AWS and even enterprise clients are using as well too. As far as tailored training goes, the content that's part of the program is not very templatized. It's very bespoke and curated content based off of where you're at. So if I was to utilize thinking about our Black Founders cohort that just wrapped up, we had some startups that were right at MVP, and we had some that were already onboarding customers and their product was launched. And so it was a nice mix for the cohort, but it also allowed us to provide tailored training to each of them based off of where they're currently at in their business. We are your extended team. And so what that means is you not just get a technical advisor, you get someone like Megan, who is on our VC team, who works with investors every day, who works with startups who are trying to scale and focus on their go-to-market. And then you get that business curated experience as well too. And then in addition to that, if you think about all of Amazon and not just AWS, from Prime to Alexa to Amazon Care to Ring to Audible, you get access to all of those leaders in all those different fields. So whether you're building a retail startup and you want to talk to Amazon Fashion, or if you're building a healthcare startup and you want to talk to Amazon Care, we introduce you to those leaders for business discussions as well as mentoring as well. And then lastly, community. We're really big on community at AWS, and our Black Founders cohort Slack is still very active. That program ended, what was it, Megan, maybe like 2-3 weeks ago. And still, we are having a lot of conversations with our founders in our Slack community. We also have an Activate program, and then we also have a Loft program. And so you get access to all of those communities and then each other, of course. All right, here are just some great photos that you can see from the program. So what I specifically really love about this program is its hybrid nature. So it's very different than any other accelerator program that you'll find. But what's super interesting about it is that week 1 of the program is completely in person. So, we do take into everyone's health into concern, and so we do check for vaccinations. Masks are required. When we ran the Black Founders Week 1 program, it was a little bit earlier on in the year, but as you can see here, some of the fun photos of both in person and virtual. We have weeks 2 through 7, which is fully virtual, but as you can see, maybe in the top left of your screen, that's our San Francisco loft, and some of the founders were based in SF, and so they decided to do a meetup. So it's a fun way for us to kind of build that community in person, week 1, and then weeks 2 through 7 are virtual, and then weeks 8 is in person as well too. Flight and hotel and all meals are all covered by this program, so you don't have to worry about using your $125,000 cash to fly out to our headquarters in Seattle. We cover that as part of the program as well too. So if you see here on the photo, these are some of our in-person weeks. Megan, there you are in the top left. And some of our founders.
All these photos bring back amazing memories, these incredible founders.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the founders are getting ready to pitch, as you can see some of them on stage. And so with the curriculum, there's a lot of pitch practice that we do. We pair you with a pitch coach as well. So you get a mentor, a business mentor, you get a technical mentor, you get a pitch coach, and they work with you on your narrative and your overall messaging, as well as helping you be able to kind of present on stage and giving you instant feedback. So there's a lot of private one-to-one coaching, and then there's pitching in front of your peers that are part of the cohort. And then of course, week 8 is our investor week. And that's the week where you'll get to pitch to investors. It's a little bit different than what you might hear of like a typical demo day for an accelerator, because it's really about rewarding you and showcasing how you've been able to kind of grow your business within the 8 weeks. So it's more of a culmination and a celebration, less of a competition, pitch competition. All right. Okay, so let's talk about how you get in. Let's kind of dive through what the criteria is and what we're looking for. So for our women's program, we are looking for women-led startups. So you must have one or more CEO or co-founder who owns the majority of the company that identifies as a woman. You should have a CTO in place. So as I talked a little bit earlier about you get paired with a technical mentor, it's super important to have someone that's focused on your business from a technical standpoint and can work with our technical team to able to work with you on your product. The company must be based in the US. This is a US program for now. At some point, we'll likely make it global, but this is a US program. And so we're looking for startups that are based in the United States. Early funding, so $500,000 and less, and then less than 5 years old. So the purpose of this is that we're really trying to look for startups that have not had a chance to really raise money. We want to help you cross that barrier, and we're looking for startups that are still pretty early, that we can work with you on your product development, get you to launch, work with you on your go-to-market strategy. So this is very early, but it's a little bit past that stage of I just have an idea. And then that touches on my last bullet point about your product should be fully developed. You should have an MVP, and then you should be ready for substantial scale, I would say, are the key criteria that we look for in the program.
So one thing I would say is if you are on the cusp for any of those criteria, still apply. So should I apply? The answer is yes. We want you to apply. We want the opportunity to get to know you and your business. And even if one of those criteria you're slightly outside of, you will have an opportunity in the application to address it in more detail so we can make a determination if you'd be a good fit and really if you'd benefit from our programs to make sure it's the right program for your startup at the right time to accelerate your startup. So definitely apply with a resounding yes. We also hope that in filling out this application, it will be a helpful exercise to you regardless, to work on your pitch, to work on your value proposition. It will be a forcing mechanism for you to get really clear about where your startup is, what your asks are. So we're hopeful regardless that preparing this and putting this application together is a helpful exercise for your business. Denise, big question for you. What should all of the incredible women founders who are on the line, what should they do to make their application really stand out?
Yeah, I love that we're talking about this. We didn't talk enough about this for our last cohort. And so this is the part that I want to spend some time on and talk through a little bit. So what we're going to do is kind of walk you through some examples and kind of talk about a little of the core questions that are part of the application. And just for those that are on the line that should know this, that I look at every single one of the applications, and I love going through and reading all of the questions that we ask you related to your business, but there's a few pieces that are super important that you really want to make sure you get right. So let's go through them, Keely. Okay, so the first thing is you want to have a really clear idea, and you want to articulate it in a way that we can quickly understand. So we received thousands of applications, as you can imagine, and unfortunately, we're only able to select 25 startups. So being super crisp and clear with your messaging on your application about who you are, what you're building, who your team my teammates are, and why you are uniquely positioned to solve this problem, and why it's a problem would be helpful. Oftentimes I find that startups are building in industries that we may not necessarily completely understand 100%, or building products or solving problems that we don't understand. You know it more than we do. And so your job is really to kind of help us understand why this is a big problem, and then how you are going to solve it, and then with your team, and then why you're uniquely positioned to do so. So let's talk a little bit about like rules of thumb and what that means. So you want to spend roughly about 75% of your time preparing your materials for the application, and then 25% on the actual application. So there's a ton of questions in the application. And the good news is that you can download, is this one of our pieces on the webinar?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so the application is there. So you can take a look at it now, or you can take a look at it later. It's also on our website. When you go to apply, it's on right at the top there. You can download it. And I think it's super helpful to take a moment to take a look at the questions and prepare all of your articles before you actually submit it. I saw a lot of founders last time were so quick to want to go on and apply, which is great and exciting, but they just started answering the questions and they realized midway through, like, oh, wait, I don't have that with me. Let me go try to find it. Or they're just rushing and throwing in information, and it makes it very confusing for us to kind of figure out exactly what the message might be for your business. So my suggestion would be to download the application, sit down with your team, take a look at it, and start planning out what you may want to say and play around with it a little bit. And then when you're ready, then spend that 25% of your time actually filling out the application.
Yeah, I will just concur that a little prep can go a long way here, because at Amazon, we think writing is a big part of our culture. We're constantly trying to improve the way we write. And one of the best ways to communicate while writing is to be as brief as possible. So by doing a little prep in advance, you can answer each question specifically, because you know there's an area further in the application where you can address something you wanted to bring up. So a little prep definitely goes a long way.
Yep. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the core questions that you want to obsess over. What is your company's one-liner? This is the first thing I look at in the application. And by the way, it's probably about the 15th question. So it's not even at the top of the page, but it's definitely one that I go to first, because I really want to understand, how are you selling your idea in an elevator, right? So you think of that, 30-second elevator pitch. If somebody asks you what you're building, we want to understand what that one-liner is. And I have to say, probably about 90% of the startups that went through our last cohort threw out their one-liners completely and rebuilt it by the end of the program. This is going to be one of those things that you're constantly trying to kind of improve on and get it right. So again, about planning in advance, I would definitely say make sure your one-liner is super crisp and clear. I want to know exactly what it is that you're building. We had a startup that applied and got into our Black Founders program, led by a woman. This startup is called Church Space, and I couldn't understand exactly what the business was just by the name of Church Space. But then when I read their one-liner, and the one-liner was simply put, we are the Airbnb for churches. And I thought, oh, okay, I get it. We are the Airbnb for, for churches, and they're called Church Space. So being super clear and crisp and very short, less words is better for your one-liner. This is definitely the one that you want to get right. Megan, anything to add to one-liner?
Let's go into this example here. I think this is going to say it all. So let's start with someone's first attempt at a one-liner.
Yeah, so connecting independent contractors with scooters to deliver convenient items to college students quickly. Do you know what that means? You know what they do?
Fine. It's a little like in my opinion, it's a little wordy. I have to slowly read it
Yeah.
to have it make sense to me. Connecting independent contractors with scooters. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's like a good first stab. But I think this person could do better.
Yeah, I almost feel like if I have to read it a couple of times to figure out exactly what it is. So let's take a look at how they could have wrote this. Your favorite stuff delivered in under 10 minutes, right? So super
I mean,
easy
I'm
to figure
interested
out.
now in this.
Yeah, yeah,
Business for
same.
myself.
Yeah,
So it doesn't have
yeah,
to be perfect. It doesn't have to be comprehensive or exhaustive. It has to be a snapshot that gives someone an idea of what your business is about and the value that it's bringing
yeah.
to the end user.
Great. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the one-liner. Describe the problem you are solving or the business pain you are addressing. So I think my thought here on this particular point is, again, you're so much more closer to the problem than we or even investors will ever be. And so it's super important to kind of describe exactly what that means. So let's take a look at how you can do that. So there's the what, the why, and then the value. So if you take a look at this slide, you'll see on point number one, company is making X for Y to do Z, all right? And then there's the why should this product exist? And then the value, customers now can use X to do Y. So this is just like a really good, practice example that you can do with your team. Again, download the application, sit with your team, and really kind of think through some of these core questions. And by the way, I'll say, whether you decide to apply for our accelerator or not, the majority of them are going to ask you questions related to this as well too. So it's going to be super important for you to kind of really kind of fine tune exactly the problem that you're solving. And this is a really great take home exercise that you can do. Megan, anything else to add to that?
I think we can't overstate simple is best. And sometimes as the founder, you're so thick in all the details. If you need to get, phone an advisor or a friend and just bounce some ideas off the wall, an external person, just to say, does this make sense to you as someone who doesn't know about the industry, who doesn't know about my business? Does this make sense to you as an outsider? Would be a good litmus test for making it really digestible for our team to, when we're reviewing applications, to understand what you do. Very simply.
Right. Okay, so the next one, why are you and your team uniquely qualified to solve this problem? So this kind of touches on exactly a little bit what we talked about earlier about having a technical person in place on your team, whether that's you or whether that's someone else, and really kind of defining exactly how your team is built to solve this problem. And maybe it's not necessarily solving the problem today, but you are able to build a team around the idea and find those experts in order to feel confident that you can solve this problem. So this doesn't necessarily mean you need to be a serial entrepreneur or you need to have exited another really major startup or be an engineer over at Amazon. What this basically means is that you identify with the problem, you understand how to get to solve that problem, and you built a team that can address it, and you have core expertise that's separated that makes up your team to be a very attractive team to solve this problem. So again, this isn't anything that we've invented. You'll find this across the board on a number of accelerators that really want to focus on team. In fact, I've spoken to so many investors that they tell me they often really just invest in team. They don't always invest just in the product, but they're I would say that this is something you really want to ensure that you have a team that's around you that can do almost anything. Megan, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, even as a founder, you've undertaken the journey of being a founder and bringing to life your startup, and the bet that you're really making is a bet on yourself. So letting us know why you and your team are uniquely capable to bring this solution to life goes a long way. And then lastly, I think there's one more core question we want you to obsess over.
Yeah, so what specific goals and milestones do you want to achieve by the end of the program? So, as I mentioned before, we are not the only one running accelerators. You have a lot of options of accelerators for early stage startups. But what I'm most interested in reading on your application is, how can we help you? When you think about AWS, what is it that we can do that can really help accelerate your business? And what are those goals? We really like to kind of sit down with founders that very first week when you're matched with your business mentor and your technical mentor, and really sit down and think through your business goals and your technical goals. And we want to make sure that we can help address them, right? The worst we can do is accept you into a program and we're unable to help you, right? And so I want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what your milestones are, what specific goals you have, and have you had a chance to kind of think through how Amazon or AWS can help you propel forward by addressing those goals. So during week one, in the in-person component of the program, you'll sit down and we'll map out what those goals are, and we'll focus typically on 2 to 3 things that we could do in an 8-week period. And we really want to see those results. We really want to see all those goals checked off the list. So when you're sitting with your team and thinking through, what do I really need my business to do in a program like this, and how can Amazon help me do that? Those are the goals that you really want to think through when you put on your application. Okay, don't rush production. So part of our application process is that you do have to submit a video. I obsess over watching the videos. And the reason for it is because I want to make sure that, again, that we can support your growth and your goals. And I get a little bit of a human element to it versus just reading the application. So it allows me to see your team. It allows me to understand more about the problem that you're solving. And it just kind of pulls away from the application, right? So there was a lot of fun videos that we saw in our Black Founders cohort, but there were also some videos that it was really difficult to kind of understand what was happening. There was a couple of videos where founders were in their car driving and trying to record their video. There were some where they were in a library and you can hear people in the background asking them to be quiet, and so they were whispering, so it was really difficult to understand. And then there were some videos where it was just one person of the team, right? I want to see your team. I want to see everybody in the video. I want to understand why you're able to solve this problem, how you've been able to be successful thus far in your business, what sort of traction you've received. So I would say make it fun. You don't have to, hire any sort of production crew to do this. But we'd love to see some videos that tells a little bit more of the backstory of who you are and how you think that AWS can help you accelerate your business by being part of this cohort.
Okay, now you're ready to apply. Hopefully you have all the tips at your fingertips here. So here's some timelines, dates that you should keep in mind. So if you met the criteria that Denise walked us through, and again, if you're right on the cusp of some of that criteria, feel free to apply anyway. The only, the very hard criteria that, we are not accepting companies that are based outside of the US. But if you're right on the cusp of the funding, et cetera, we still want to hear from you. We still want you to apply. So the big date to keep in mind, the full red stop date, is August 26th. The earlier you can get your application in, the better, because you want time to prep. You want to download that application, read through it, have time to talk to your team, have time to write it up. So I suggest the earlier you start, just the more time you have to submit an application that you're really proud of, and that's really clear. And even though the deadline is August 26th, we will start interviewing candidates as early as August 23rd. So the earlier you get it in, just kind of the more information you'll be able to share with us by the time that we start interviewing. So the earlier, the better. So if you meet the criteria, you may receive a screening call from our team, and we'll clarify and validate some questions we have about your application. And if you advance to the next round, we will be doing panel interviews. Those are only happening on August 23rd, August 24th, August 31st, and September 1st. So that will be a panel interview for those that advance to the next round. And then we will be sending out notification the week of September 12th. So that's the date to know when we will be informing selections, the week of September 12th. I think that wraps up all of our tips, tricks, the benefits of the program, the timeline. I think, Denise, it's time for us to answer some Q&A questions.
Yeah.
Oh, one more piece,
Before
sorry.
we jump to that, yeah. Do you want to talk through this a little bit, Megan?
Sure. Yeah, so for those startups that are not selected to the program, we still want to make sure that AWS supports you in any way that we can. So we have a few options for you. You can join the AWS Activate Council. So you can be eligible for our founders AWS credits package through the Activate Council and get a variety of other support from AWS technical resources. They're all available for you. We'd absolutely encourage founders to apply again for future upcoming cohorts. And then last two, we have resources and events and spaces available for you starting today. I mean, they're available for you right now. So we have AWS Startup Loft events. Some are virtual. We have the Loft in San Francisco that Denise mentioned that's open today. We have the Loft in New York City that will be opening shortly, sometime soon. And then we have online resources. So the Startup Resource Library, there's a ton of information available for you, and we invite you to take advantage of that, even if you're not selected as a part of the program. Okay, great, cool. We are taking questions now. So we're not letting anyone off mute, so if you have a question for us, submit it through the questions pane on the attendee control panel. And it looks like we're already getting some questions in. So I'm gonna ask you this first question we're seeing coming in, Denise. All right, so it looks like there were two videos that we're supposed to submit. One is about the team and one is optional about the project. Should we talk about the team and project in the first required video, or should we split it into two videos?
Yeah, so great question. I think it's up to you, right? I think that if you are a solo founder, let's say you're a solo founder, you're both the technical person as well as the business person, and you want to just do a video with yourself and then to also talk about your product and do like a quick demo. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I would say if you have a little bit of a larger team and you want to focus a little bit more on the problem, then I would say focus on that for one video. And then if your product is easily demonstrated in like an explainer video, maybe perhaps upload that separately. But I'm mainly interested in understanding more about the team and then the problem that you're solving. I think the product demo is great to see as well too, if you have it. But again, if you've been very specific in your application about what the product is, what your current tech stack is, focusing on those goals and milestones, then I'm okay with just the one video submitted that's focusing on the team and the problem you're solving and why you are uniquely positioned to solve that problem. I would also say, as far as the video is concerned, I'm less interested on you doing flipping through your pitch deck in the video. I'm looking for more of the human element to who you are and your business and your team. And so I'm looking for more of a video like that, less of a video about screen sharing with me and kind of walking it through your pitch deck.
Okay, so I'm hearing it, if you want to make the most of your time, one video is fine. Over index on the human aspects, introduce your team, why you're uniquely qualified, and what problem you're solving. All right, Denise, some other questions popping up here. Do we need to have a legal entity before applying?
Yeah, so you should. You should do that before you even create a business. I'm not an attorney, so don't hold that on me, but I would say that you should. As we think about bringing in investment dollars. C Corp is something that investors really want to see. So I would suggest that you should have that formed prior to even starting a business. And when you start to think about investments, you should think about getting that set up and moving away from an LLC or a sole proprietor. Like those are really challenging as it comes to taxes and all sorts of things like that. I personally ran into when I started up.
Thank you, Denise. We also have a question coming in about what qualifies as a minimum viable product, an MVP. This person who asked the question has a beta tested product and wants to use the funds, if accepted into the program, to build a fully functioning tech product.
Yeah, so that one's a little bit tough, right? I think it kind of depends on how beta it is, right? And how many customers have utilized it. So the way that we think about this program is by the end of 8 weeks, we want to introduce you to seed investors, right? And so if you think that within 8 weeks, your product will be beyond the beta, beyond an initial MVP, and you be at launch stage, then absolutely, right? But that's a lot to get done. And again, it totally depends on your team, right? If you have, a CTO plus a lead engineer, and then maybe you're using a consulting agency to do some back-end dev work, then you might be able to move that quickly and that fast. But I want to make sure that you will be able to have time to kind of really participate in all the technical components of the program. So it's a little bit tough to answer that without kind of knowing more about how beta you are. But I would say you probably want to be at the point where you're ready for substantial scale. That's really the way that we try to shape up the conference. I mean, not the conference, the program.
The program, yeah, I agree. I think that during the program, you have to be able to introduce your product to customers, be getting feedback and evolving that product roadmap. So whatever you want to call it, some people may call their product beta, but actually be quite advanced in their product development stage. So it's just thinking about if you're ready during the 8-week program to start evolving your product, launching it with customers, getting their feedback, etc. Okay, a couple more questions. So is there additional support for disabled female founders?
Yeah, 100%. So in our last cohort, we had a founder who is deaf, and we actually brought out her interpreters, her own personal interpreters, to the in-person week, so for week 1, and we brought 3 of them so that they can transition. And then we had interpreters throughout the virtual component if she asked for it, and then again for week 8. So we've also had moms that were part of our program and they needed mother's rooms or they needed an assistant. So we paired them with someone that can help them while they were breastfeeding and pumping and those types of things. So absolutely, we're making this program as inclusive as possible. And so should you be accepted into the program, we will work with you one-to-one to figure out what sort of needs that you may have. And we're obviously happy to accommodate.
Denise, do you know how long the AWS Activate credits are good for that are issued in the program?
Yeah, it really depends on, the amount and how you obtain the credits. So within the Activate program, we have what's called a founders tier and we have a portfolio tier. The founders tier is for any startup around the world that is bootstrapping their business. You receive 1,000 in AWS credits, and that credit is good for 1 year. Beyond that, with the portfolio, it kind of depends on how you received it because it's typically delivered to you through one of our partners. So again, it really depends. As it relates to this particular program, startups that get accepted into the Impact Accelerator, you receive 100,000 in AWS credits, but what we do is we work with you to distribute those credits in a little bit of a different way of buckets. So you'll get a big bucket for like 2 years, and then should you exhaust that within 2 years, then you get the next big bucket delivered to you. So we try to extend it out as much as possible, so that way you're not blowing through the credits, and then you're also not expiring expiring the credits as well too. But 100,000 credits takes you a really long time to go through, several years. So I don't have any concerns about startups kind of running through that credit. And if you're building really substantially in your business and you're blowing through the 100,000 really quickly, then we should talk and figure out another credit program to put you on.
Denise, can a nonprofit founder apply?
Oh, absolutely. So we actually have an entire business component of AWS just for nonprofits. It's called a nonprofit startup team. So should you get accepted into the program, we would probably pair you with one of those business mentors on that side as well. So yeah, you should absolutely. This is not just for for-profit startups. It's for any type of startup. So you should absolutely do it. We actually had a startup of GiveLink that was part of our past cohort that was doing some nonprofit work as well as part of his startup. And so, yeah, absolutely. We love to see the nonprofits as well. We're agnostic on that.
I think we're kind of running short on time. There's two quick questions I want to just squeeze in if you're willing, Denise. Do you have to be building on AWS to apply for the program?
No, you don't. So we are cloud agnostic. You could be building on any other platform or just not even on on cloud just yet, right? And so you do not have to be building. Now you'll receive 100,000 AWS credits. So we like to figure out how we can help you utilize that part of the benefits of the program, but you do not. It's not a criteria that we look at.
And then this last question that came in is, how many applicants, Denise, do you expect to have for this cohort?
Yeah, so the AWS Impact Accelerator just launched in April of this year. So we have not met just a baseline just yet on this. With our Black Founders cohort, we had well over 1,000 applications. I'm assuming we'll see the same for the women's cohort, but it's still very new, right? It's a very new program. And so what we're hopeful to see is I'm less interested in the number of applicants. I'm more interested in seeing the quality of the women founders that come through the program. All right, what other questions do we have?
Yeah, we can go a little bit longer. It looks like folks are staying on. We're just getting a few more questions in. If you don't mind, Denise, let's go for a little bit longer. Okay, great.
Let's do it.
This next question is, what are some examples of goals that founders reached or embarked on during their time in the last accelerator?
Yeah, so there were a few goals related to debugging issues. So there were some startups that had been tooling away for a long time, trying to figure something out technically on their business, and they just couldn't figure out how to actually do it. And so one of their big goals was help me solve this problem. And funny enough, they actually solved that problem within 2 weeks within the program. Some of the other goals were non-technical founders that had technical teams, but they weren't full time. And so they needed to kind of set a goal of, how do I turn my lead engineer that's part time into a full-time role and make this person a CTO. And so some of our technical advisors were able to kind of sit down with them and workshop their architecture and figure out exactly how they can turn their team into more of a longer technical team, utilize international resources for some of the back-end dev work, and then really focus and kind of upscale the lead person that was in that role and making them full time. So there's some that's related to hiring, essentially, some of those goals. For business goals, there was a lot of goals related to pitch decks, right? I have a pitch deck, but I've pitched it in front of a number of investors, but I've not really gotten any sort of feedback on it. I've not been able to kind of move the needle at all. And so they focus a lot of their goals surrounding pitch decks, narratives, how do they tell a really good story, go-to-market strategies has been a really big part of the accelerator. So there were a lot of goals related to go-to-market strategies.
I was going to mention
well
that,
too.
Denise, in some of the mentoring I did with some of the startup founders, they were very focused on go-to-market, and that included getting a certain number of pilot customers using their product and providing them with feedback. or with ways to introduce themselves to more customers. And then
Yeah.
also, this kind of ties into the pitch deck, but introductions to investors and being investor ready and ready for those conversations with investors towards the end of the program was another topic that came up.
Yeah, and one other thing that I would say that we kind of did, it wasn't necessarily a goal listed or a milestone listed, but it was something we realized it was a goal that many of the startups should have had, was about brand and presence. And so I sit on the marketing team. I have a marketing background. And one of the things I noticed was, some of the messaging on the websites or some of their the founder's personal brand on LinkedIn wasn't that great. And so what we did week one is we had a Rock Your LinkedIn Profile session where we brought in LinkedIn experts and they sat with the founders to talk to them about their brand and presence online. We didn't put this in the slide deck, but we probably should have earlier on. One of the things I also look at through that vetting process, and I'm telling a little bit of the behind the scenes here, but I think the founders would appreciate it, is I go and look at everyone's LinkedIn. I go and take at your LinkedIn. I'm not necessarily looking at your Instagram or your Twitter, but I'm definitely going to LinkedIn as it's your business profile. I want to see if your company has its own LinkedIn page. I want to see if you've listed your startup on your LinkedIn profile. So I want to take a look at those aspects and look at your background and what you've been working on prior to it. So I would say those would be probably some of the things too that we realized that some of the founders didn't really have a brand and presence. And so we did spend time with them, helping them craft that brand and presence message as well too. So it probably should have been a goal of some of theirs, but they didn't even realize that it should have been.
So talking about that branded presence, somebody wanted to double click on the pitch video. Denise, are you really looking for something that's down to earth, or does it need to be very, very polished?
I'm looking for something down to earth. I'm a down to earth person. I think we all are here at AWS on the startups team. We wear t-shirts, wear jeans, and I rock sneakers every day. So I'm looking for something really much more down to earth, just so I can kind of get to brass tacks of who you are, what's your team, how did you meet your teammates, what are you all building, why you to solve this problem. So not necessarily looking for some big production. If you want to create a big production video, that's okay too. So we won't turn those down, but something a little bit more kind of down to earth that just kind of showcases who you are and what you're building.
And then I know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it, Denise. Can someone reapply if they've already applied to the Black Founders cohort?
Yeah, they can and they should. We talked a little bit about this internally about, can we go take a look at the women founders that apply to the Black Founders program and reach out to them? And yes, we can, but your business has changed so much, right? When you're early stage, 1 month can make a huge difference in what your application may say. So I would say if you apply to Black Founders back in April, please do reapply, because all of the information you submitted is likely, dated information. So you should reapply. Yes.
And then to follow up on that, someone asked about how the review process, what it looks like after the application is submitted. So really quickly, I'll run through. Denise, let me know if I miss anything. But after applications close on the 26th, if founders meet the criteria, they will receive a screening call that will clarify and validate any questions the team has. And then if that founder advances to the next round, they will be invited to a panel interview, which happens on August 23rd, 24th, 31st, and September 1st. And then final selections are announced the week of September 12th. Denise, did I miss anything in there?
No, you didn't miss anything. The only thing I will say on the 2 calls, just so that way it's clear about the difference in the 2 calls. So should you advance and get the initial screening call, the screening call is really just to kind of verify the information on your application. As Megan mentioned earlier, there are probably 2 main things that we really want to make sure we get right with the founders that are selected. Is 1, you are a women-led tech startup, and the woman owns more than 51% of the business, right? This program and this cohort is specifically designed for those who identify as a woman. So I would say that. And then the second part is that you're US based. So the reason why we have that criteria is purely for tax reasons, right? This is a program in the US. You'll have to, manage your taxes for the distribution of the cash. So it's important that you're US based. And then also for the hybrid nature of the program. So we do cover the cost of the flight and hotel for you and your co-founder, whoever's the CTO, to fly out for the in-person weeks. And so in order for us to do that, you should be US based and living in the US in order for that to happen.
Okay, we have 3 more questions, so let's try to get to these in the last 5 minutes. The first is, are there certain businesses or industries that this cohort will focus on?
No, so we are industry agnostic, cloud agnostic, for-profit, non-for-profit, B2C, B2B, B2, BC, you name it. So no, we love all types of startups. And if you can think about the big landscape of what makes AWS or makes Amazon, we essentially have a team that is in every part of the industry. So whether you're in energy, retail, you name it, we're open to all of those startups.
Somebody asked a very specific question about the 500K in funding around if institutional funding encompasses friends and families, grants, crowdfunding.
I'm so glad somebody asked this question. It does not. So if you have, received friends and family above the 500K, that does not mean you cannot apply to this program. So institutional funding means is there someone on your cap table, basically, right? Have you put a VC on your cap table? They've taken some sort of amount of equity from your business. That's what we mean by institutional funding. If you have friends and family that have contributed, if you've crowd funded, if you received those types of funds, if you put in your own funding, or even if you are, what I used to always say is if you are customer backed, right? So meaning you have customers who have, paid you for your services or your product beyond the 500K, you should still apply. So that is really just for those that have received some sort of investment funds.
Well, I'm glad that somebody asked this last final question. I think it's such a good one. What is the time commitment for this program?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. Very good. So I'm hoping Hannah can put into the chat, remind me, but I believe what we had stated was that there is about 6 hours per week that founders, I think 4 to 6 hours that founders should carve out. And that is for the virtual components, right? So virtually weeks 2 through 7, there's probably about 3 to 4 sessions that happen virtually during those times. And so they're all online. And so I would say if you have a team of 2 or more, what we found in last cohort is that they would tag team and send one of their co-founders to participate in some of those sessions. So I would say anywhere between 3 to 6 hours per week. And then for the in-person weeks, it's a little bit more intense, right? Because we're bringing you out in person. And so you're really kind of working on your startup, those 4 to 5 days for the most part all day. And then there's a lot of fun activities that we do in the evening as well too.
And 2 more things I'll add is really you will get out what you put in. This is an incredible opportunity to access Amazon, AWS's community network. So the more that you're able to put into the program, the more your startup will benefit and you'll get out of it. And one more thing about what Denise was sharing is some of the sessions that we have are business specific or technically specific. So your CTO could be attending the technically specific tracks, and your CEO and business leaders attending the business tracks. So there is a little bit of a divide and conquer for some of the sessions. So I think we kind of covered as many questions as we can. Just a reminder to everyone that we will respond to anything we didn't cover via email. And we have a survey at the end of this webinar. So when you leave, you will receive a survey, and we would greatly appreciate that you complete the survey and provide us with your feedback so we can continue to improve these types of Ask Me Anything webinars and make sure we're answering the questions that matter to you most. So thank you in advance for taking time to complete that survey for us and joining us today. Thank you. Thank you, Denise and the whole team, and have a great rest of your day, all.